In this unit, we'll be discussing World War II and the Cold War. This will be standard number 19 and 20 of your GSE U.S. History Standards. We're going to examine the origins and major developments and the domestic impacts of World War II, including the growth of the federal government. And we're going to analyze the international and domestic policies, including the very influential technology advancements and social changes during the Truman-Eisenhower administration. These are your key terms, key concepts. We always start the unit off with pictures just to show some political cartoons to grab interest. You see on the left the Lend-Lease Act, where the U.S. is lending and leasing weapons to countries that will fight for them in this war, protect their interests. And you see on the left that Germany is not very pleased with the United States lending weapons to countries fighting against them, and particularly Britain. So the Lend-Lease Act. The Lend-Lease Act was one of the neutrality acts that's going to allow the U.S. to lend and lease military equipment to countries that was vital to the defense of the United States of America. The United States lend $50 billion worth of supplies and aid to Britain, France, Soviet Union, and China. And China, because we're trying to stop communism from spreading and supporting the Nationalist Party in China. What is this image of? You guessed it right, Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor happened on 12/7/1941. You see there on the left the Japanese planes flying over Pearl Harbor, dropping bombs on carriers, the U.S. carriers, and on the U.S. base there at Pearl Harbor. You see actual pictures on the right of the tragedy at Pearl Harbor. A very, very sad day, a day that FDR said that will live in infamy. You see the headlines on the right, Japanese bombing Honolulu, 350 dead, and warships fired upon. Shortly after, FDR is going to declare war, and the U.S. immediately begins to come out with propaganda to help persuade people to support the war. You see here on the left where the U.S. is needing money from the American people in order to save or free the American people from the Japanese, seeing that the Japanese has caused a tragedy at Pearl Harbor, and the U.S. armed needing Americans to work, fight, and to sacrifice. Then on the right, you see the Japanese man slapping Uncle Sam, and they're asking the U.S. Citizens, are we going to let him get away with that? So this is a primary source document where FDR is giving a speech saying that this is a day that will live in infamy, and asking Congress for a declaration of war against the Japanese. And in addition to that, he's going to ask Congress for the displacement of Japanese people. Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. You need to know that the Japanese surprise attacked the United States. Over 2,000 Americans were killed. This resulted in the U.S. officially entering World War II. And you see most of the fighting that Americans are going to be doing in World War II will be against the Japanese Empire, which their empire extends over the Pacific Ocean. And one of the first major battles, as you see on this picture right here, is going to be on the right, close to Pearl Harbor, which is the Battle of Midway. The Battle of Midway is going to be the turning point of the World War II in the Pacific. The U.S. is going to deliver a fatal blow, as seen on the right, and the U.S. is going to take the island of Midway. This is going to become a place where the U.S. can launch attacks on the Japanese. They're going to use this as a refueling station in order to have ships and airplanes launch attacks toward the Japanese Empire. This is going to be a major geographical advantage for the United States in the Pacific. This map is an image of U.S. sites of the creation of the atomic bomb, which was part of the Manhattan Project. As you notice on the screen, Manhattan is not one of the locations. They call it the Manhattan Project because Manhattan is a code name. They put it everywhere except Manhattan. On the left, you see one of the atomic bombs. I don't know if this Little Boy or Fat Man. Those were the names given to the bombs. And on the right, you see the bomb going off. And this what happens below where the bomb is going off. This happens in Nagasaki in Japan. This is a city with hundreds of thousands of people in it. And as you see, there's no people and there's no buildings. Everything was pretty much destroyed. The Japanese, after 2 bombs, they're going to surrender, and the U.S. is going to celebrate VJ Day. VJ Day, which VJ meaning victory in Japan. The Manhattan Project, code name for the creation of the atomic bomb, and the central location, the secret laboratory for the creation of the atomic bomb, was at Los Alamos, New Mexico. The dropping of the atomic bomb, the U.S. needed to defeat the Japanese Navy in the Pacific Ocean. They feared that they would lose millions of people in an invasion of Japan. Truman decided to drop the atomic bomb in order to save Americans' lives. Not only to save American lives, but also to show that the United States had something that other countries did not have. These are the review questions. These are things that you should know. If you want to, pause the video and try to answer the questions. Now, World War II in Europe. The turning point of World War II in Europe was D-Day. As you see on the screen, you have the United Kingdom, and the U.S. and Canada is going to launch an attack across the English Channel and invade France at Normandy. And France is at this moment being occupied by the Germans. This attack is going to be the largest human invasion in world history. They're going to sacrifice a lot of lives on D-Day. However, they're able to get a footstool in France, and they begin to free France. And they free France in less than 2 months, and they begin to push toward Berlin. These are images of not actual D-Day, but Saving Private Ryan, a great movie that depicts D-Day. And there's more images, just a bloody, bloody scene. Very, very bad for a lot of Americans, but a glorified day at the end. And this is more footage from Saving Private Ryan. This is Hitler. The race is on to get to Hitler. To the victor goes the spoils. The U.S. and the Soviets want to be the first to get to Hitler. D-Day was a major turning point. The code name was Operation Overlord. The Allied forces are going to invade Nazi-occupied France and then begin to push east toward Germany. The fall of Berlin. The Soviets are going to actually get there first. They beat the United States to the punch. And they're going to take down Hitler. And this is where Hitler commits suicide. There's many myths and stories about Hitler killing his dog, killing his wife, then killing himself. But the Soviets take over. Not only do they get to Hitler first, but they get to most of the concentration camps first. And with the victory In Berlin, we celebrate VE Day. You would never guess what it means. Yes, victory in Europe, right? And victory in Europe is going to signal the end of the war. The victory in Europe actually happens before the victory in Japan. The fall of Berlin, one of the final battles of the European theater in World War II. The Soviet army is going to attack Berlin from the east and the west. Historically, one of the bloodiest wars of all time, regardless of what war we're talking about. The German leader Adolf Hitler is going to commit suicide during the battle, and the result is VE Day, the end of the war in Europe. So what's going on at home? At home, we have propaganda like on the left. Uncle Sam calling for recruits to come and join the army because we need more people fighting. And because we need more people fighting, we're going to need more people on the home front to work. Who's going to fill that void? Women. As you see the picture on the right, Rosie the Riveter showing off some muscle. Women are going to take up a lot of roles of the men. Not only in the workplace, but also at home. And here's more propaganda on the left, trying to get Americans to grow things in their garden, right? The food is fighting for us. And in the middle, trying to get Americans to ride together to work and to other places in order to preserve gasoline, because gasoline is needed to fuel planes and ships and all kind of other stuff in order to fight. So if Americans are wasting that gas, then they're wasting valuable resources. That's why the picture says if you're riding alone, you're riding with Hitler. You're doing Hitler a favor by wasting all the gas. Also, they wanted any scrap rubber, any scrap metal. The U.S. would use it to help build things that were needed for the war, like gas masks, rifles, cars, and aircraft carriers. Also, aircrafts themselves. On the home front, the economy, you have war bonds. A lot of people are going to buy those war bonds. You're going to have new taxes in order to gain revenue for the war. You have the effect on women, new relationships. A lot of women are going to enter the workforce, and for the first time, women are going to begin shortly after the war to be the majority of the workforce. Women are going to take over roles of the men in a lot of homes. And do a lot of things that men would do, being head of the household. You have the effect on the military. You have African Americans that begin to work toward equal rights. You had the Executive Order 8802, which is going to affect minorities by integrating the military shortly after World War II. You have the Japanese Americans that were moved to internment camps, where the Japanese was put in remote locations in order to keep the Americans from being fearful of Japanese maybe spies or maybe possible Japanese sabotage of the Americans or a possible attack. You have Mexican American farm workers who came to the United States in order to work on the farms in order to fill the void that many Americans have left by going off to war and working. Domestic impacts of World War II. After Pearl Harbor, the war at home began. 5 million American men volunteered through the selective service system. It expanded the draft, and 10 million more men is going to join the ranks of the American forces. The selective service system is still around today. When you turn 18, you have to sign up for selective service. The Women's Auxiliary Army Corps is going to be a way that women are going to be able to volunteer to be a part of the Army in non-combat positions. Wartime conservation, they're going to ask Americans to save scrap metal. Rationing systems, they're going to hand out coupon books in order to keep people from buying up all of the meat, sugar, coffee, and gasoline in order to preserve resources for the war. You're going to have people like A. Philip Randolph is going to threaten to march on Washington because black people are not getting enough jobs. And this threat to march on Washington is going to force FDR to issue an executive order stopping people from discriminating against blacks. And you have another second migration. There's the executive order 8802. More propaganda. There's Japanese internment camps. And those are the review questions.